Happy New Year, everyone. Well, what's happened to 2022 so far? All I can tell you is that first thing on New Year's Day, I woke up in bed, and as I pulled myself up in bed, I trapped a nerve in my shoulder, leading me to spend the next 2 days in bed, in pain, and not really starting the new year as I intended to. And so, today, on the 3rd of January, I get the chance to see what's happening in 2022. And I find myself walking up these rather lovely rustic stone steps here down on the Gower Peninsula, following the coastal path. I've just crossed the bay at Caswell, and I am on the trail of one of my stories, and I shall tell you what story that is a little bit further up the path. So it doesn't take long, quite a nice path, beautiful scenes, until we get to a 3-way marker and we arrive here. This is Brandy Cove. On Brandy Cove you can find a few caves. I imagine at one time they were much bigger. There's another one where clearly there's been a huge rockfall. But these caves of Brandy Cove are home to 2 ghost stories. One, the scream of a woman to be heard echoing around the cove night after night until her body was discovered and her murderer put to justice. But there is another, much older story, slightly better well known, the story of Old Moll, the ghost of a woman who came to make the caves here at Brandy Cove her home. And nobody knew where she came from or why she would choose to make such a damp and inhospitable place her home, but she did. And as is often the way, even today, when people don't understand you, they sometimes turn against you, and so it was with Old Moll. I won't recount the full story for you, but eventually she was driven away. She was shot at first, and then the story says she transformed herself into a racing hare and ran away across the fields. But when she finally met her end, her ghost returned to these caves of Brandy Cove, intent on taking revenge on the people of Gower. And not surprisingly, stories like that are a great way to keep people away from the coastline. And when you come to a place known as Brandy Cove, and you know that the coastline of South Wales, and particularly Gower, has a very strong tradition, not just of dog walkers, but also of smugglers. It doesn't take much for you to figure out why Brandy Cove was known as Brandy Cove. Undoubtedly the place where great barrels, amongst a range of other ill-gotten goods, were brought ashore. And smugglers were well known for creating scary stories to keep people away from the caves and the places where they would bring their goods ashore. But there is another bay further on from Brandy Cove, and I'm hoping that there's still just enough sunlight for us to venture along, because it is the location of another story. This is most certainly cleaning out the old windpipe. This is the path that I'm currently going up that will lead us towards another bay, a bay known as Pwll Du Bay. And as we turn the corner, we see a very different looking beach on Gower. This is Pwll Du Bay. As you can see, very large bank of shingle there and pebbles, giving way to cliffs, and it's in amid those cliffs that you will find more caves. And it is according to a very little known story on Gower. It is one of those caves in that cliff that is the doorway to another world. A world in which an unsuspecting woodsman once stepped into. He was a man of the land, I suppose you could say. He tended the woods, earned his living from the burning of charcoal, probably in those very woods there. And as is the way of such tales, he encountered a strange and unusual woman. A woman who he instantly fell in love with and wanted to marry, and so she took him to her world. Her world, the other world within one of those caves. The father cursed him, and the woodsman was transformed into a woodpecker. A woodpecker which is said to fly amongst the trees and forests on Gower, tapping out secret messages to his love. So I'm hoping that you can hear me. It's a little bit blustery where I am now, but I had to show you this as a conclusion because I've taken the higher path back to my starting point. Not quite back where I started, but the vantage point I have found is spectacular, and it's great. It's windy, there's no one around, and it feels like a really good place to say hello to 2022. So I'm going to flick around the camera view, and you can see from this vantage point the entirety of the walk I've just taken. So let me there. So off in the distance you can see that's Caswell Bay. Just, oh, there we go, that's Caswell Bay. I have followed, you can see the path coming down into Brandy Cove. I've picked up the path that follows along below where I am now, all the way across the top of the rocks, down there, all the way round to Pwll Du Bay, just over there. And then you can see that's the path I took on the way, and I've come up the higher path that comes along the top here and along the sort of edge of the farmland, which you can't really see, but it is a beautiful vantage point. And there we go, there's Caswell Bay back there again. Is phenomenal. So a happy new year to all of you. I'm glad I finally get the chance to join you all, and here is to more stories and more adventures